there are. So I would just like reading Native people's about their own history, because it's actually might be close. Like for example, Howard Zinn, who I totally respect, and I love that account of Columbus landing. Or I don't love it; it's awful, but it's like a very I really want to feel grateful that he wrote that. But he like casually mentions in there how like people who are native to this continent came over on the Bering, like that whole Bering Strait thing, and that theory has basically been debunked, and Native people have been fighting against that theory to say, no, we're from here. Please stop saying that we came over from somewhere else, because we actually know our origins, we know our history, we know where we're from. Well, some would say they came from they all have their own origin story, and they have a really incredible oral tradition and preserve that oral tradition. But like Western people keep trying, like anthropologists keep trying to like come up with some other place that they came from. And so even Howard Zinn, who I like highly respect, just sort of said, they came from the Bering Strait. And so it's just really important to I would say read Native authors about their own history, because I was just kind of shocked to find out how sometimes even people I respect, how vastly different the histories can be.
That he buys into that. That's what you're saying.
Like he just didn't even question that. I mean, he wrote the book a while ago,
but I think Vine Deloria was challenging that.
Early, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, especially for those of you in Minnesota, but even it's worth the trip to go to Minneapolis. Jim Bear Jacobs leads Healing Minnesota Stories, and he tells the Dakota Genesis story of the people there, where the Minnesota River and the Mississippi River come together, and that's their origin story. And that's also the spot in 1862 that a concentration camp was created at Fort Snelling, and the largest mass hanging in U.S. history that Lincoln, supposedly great Lincoln, signed on for 38, and then later 2 others, the winter of 1862, and then the women and children were also taken down to Davenport.
These were all natives that were hanged?
They were all
Dakotas. So he talks about Genesis and genocide on the very same spot. So placing yourself in context where you're listening to the origin stories, the resistance stories from Native people has been really profoundly moving for us.
I have some question about navigating, so back to this Notre Dame Trail thing, they did get a Potawatomi speaker, but I read the text of his speech, I wasn't able to attend, and it was basically like, we're really proud that the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, was foundational in getting this university started, and we're owning that. Now, of course, this is one man, but I would be surprised if he were the only one of the Pokagon Band who kind of had that view, and I'm sure that's not unique. Obviously, you have so many different points of view within a tribe about their relationship with their occupiers, and how they spin that narrative. So, yeah, I guess that's troubling, because you want to just want to take the lead, of Native people, but then at the same time, when you have a sense, in your conscience about, but I don't know how I feel about that. I don't necessarily want to follow that narrative. I don't know. Has anyone come into contact with that and navigating relationship? And is it sort of an attitude of I'm just going to check my whole agenda and everything at the door and just sort of just a total posture of listening? Perhaps that seems.
I think so. I mean, I don't think we know the history well at all. I was just reminded I was reading about the Potawatomi. There's this book called The Trail of Death, and they were talking about how in northern Indiana they were very persistent in getting a Jesuit priest to come to them. There were generations before them, they had a priest, and they really it was super important to them, and then they requested. So anyway, just it's super complex. How can you know what it meant? Yeah, what it meant.
Something that I'm just going to share a confusion, maybe. With thinking about myself in the context of history and the history of this place and this nation, and many things, and I guess all these different threads of stories, maybe like stories that are told, and like the way of the settlement of this land, and like the story that's told about race, and the story of stealing people and bringing people as slaves, and like I guess what is always, I don't know why it constantly surprises me, but like how intertwined all these stories are, and how intentionally they were created. Like the story of empire, the story of colonization, like inferiority and superiority, and of the economics of it, like the kind of the intentionality of exploitation, and then like how much these stories are repeated, and then how ingrained they become, and how you know that there's this book you're talking about that's written, and how many people read that, and how many people like believe these stories, and how that was part of this story of like of this manifest destiny, and our faith, and also in the farming, like the economic exploitation of a place and the economic exploitation of peoples, and I don't know, just like how to untangle it, how and all this like intersectionality of all these different things, and like I don't know what I'm saying exactly. It's just like how very, very real it is, how very, very powerful it is, and how important it is to try to untangle, but like how everything, like you follow a thread and it just goes back to these other threads, and I don't know.
Do you have like an example that you're thinking of?
I mean, I think about stories that are intentionally created, like about that, like white people are better than black people are better than, but like, so, I feel like what I learned is some common stories about the native peoples is both that they are these noble savages, and also that they are this kind of also a story, like an idealized and a primitivized, and that like maybe we like would take their spirituality because it's sort of this dreamy, like wonderful thing, but also that they're these terrible people who need to be, have their lands taken away. But I don't know, I think about stories of race, or just that each of these classes of different colors have different status, and but yeah, or the story of manifest destiny, or the story of even of rural people, like the idea that rural people are, that the rural life is the rural people are ignorant, the rural life is unexciting, the rural life is unimportant, that we should all, this was a story that was created and told so that we would move to the cities to take jobs, to work in the factories, because that was going to be like these stories that are created and then like propagated with an economic motive, or that like, that black men are dangerous, is a story that was created like because after slavery, the only, no longer could you have a slave unless they were a criminal. So it's like, let's create this story that how dangerous black men are, so that we can criminalize every behavior that they have, so that they can become prisoners, so we can have our labor force back, so we can reclaim this slave population, 10 years later. And I don't know, I guess I'm trying, those are my examples.
Go back to when I grew up, just the mindset. I mean, absolutely nothing wrong with this. Right across the river from Peoria is Pekin, Illinois. It was Peking, this was Beijing. Supposedly somebody thought, if you drilled, it would come out right here. And they're famous for their high school sports. And I thought nothing of this. Their name was the Pekin Chinks, and they had one non-white person in the whole of Caswell County. He was Doc Lee. Everybody knew Doc Lee. He was 5 feet tall, he was Chinese, and he was mentally handicapped, and he worked for the high school as their mascot. This is in the 50s. And they finally changed their name to the Dragons, I think, in the 70s or so. The Beacon Dragons. Somebody thought maybe Chinks. But I just grew up with this. None of the churches had any problem with it.
Nobody said nothing? Nobody said nothing?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Beacon Chinks. That was a good football team, good basketball.
Oh, okay.
Which are all white. Always heard that. Good friends from Pekin.
Has anyone read Sherman Alexie? I've been reading Sherman Alexie. Yeah. The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven. It's a series of short stories, and I've been reading them. And just Alice, what you were talking about, the myth of the American Indian, that falls apart pretty quick when you're reading Sherman Alexie. He just tells these stories that are so raw and so just like visceral, but it shows this mix of kind of the ugliness of what you're talking about, like militarism, industrialism, capitalism, consumerism, and how that has played out in the lives of American Indian communities. And often he's writing in the voice of like a youth who's experiencing this life on a reservation. And again, I'm just in a time of like, I don't know what to do with this. This is so messed up, but I guess I'll just keep reading these stories. And,
I would ask the folks who have done more reflection work on this, what is what does the church need to do? What's the unique? Because these are all excellent, I think, reflections. Like as individual citizens of a nation state that has occupied this territory, I'm thinking also of our existence as Christians or as members of the body of Christ. Like, what is our particular liability and what is our particular responsibility towards decolonization? I was wondering if there are folks who've thought about these have any kind of specific observations on that question.
And ideas are ever evolving, but I have two threads of ideas. The first came from this Canadian bishop. I went to this conference last college. Okay, but I was impressed with this guy. He's a settler descendant, white Canadian bishop, Sylvan LeBoy, who has spent most of his priesthood working with, I believe it's the Cree. Sorry, that's incorrect. And he knows Cree. He speaks the language. And there's just been so much trauma, both in the U.S. and Canada over, maybe a lot of folks know, but if you don't, over like residential schools, which went on for over 100 years, like 150 years, where children, like if you had to, as a parent, if you were American Indian or Canadian or First Nations in Canada, you had to give your children to the government, who would then place them in boarding schools, often starting at the age of 5. And usually you would go to boarding school like starting in September and maybe get to come home for the summers. And you weren't allowed to speak your own language, you weren't allowed to practice your culture. And these went on, this forcible boarding school went on until the 70s, like not very long ago. And so there's a lot of survivors of boarding schools. There's a lot of sexual abuse that happened there, a lot of physical abuse. So Canada just went through this huge Truth and Reconciliation Commission process, 7 years, all about residential schools, not even about stealing land or anything, just about the fact that children were stolen from their families for about 150 years on a regular basis. Some families escaped this fate by hiding in the woods so that their children were stolen from them. But if they didn't give their children and they were found out, they would go to prison. So anyway, so Sylvan Lavoie works with communities who, everyone is still just broken, like totally broken from this. And a lot of them were forcibly, like they can only practice Christianity, because a lot of the boarding schools were run by Catholics or other Christian denominations. And this is how a lot of First Nations people became Christian, was through this forced system of only English, only Christianity, only short hair, only wear people's clothes, which often weren't even warm enough. A lot of them died of like hypothermia in these schools. So Sylvan Lavoie knows a lot of his, the people that he's known for a long time. A lot of them are going through unbaptism ceremonies. They're unbaptizing them, having ceremonies to baptize themselves in return to their native religion. And so this conference was full of like Catholics and other Christians. It was mostly probably in Chicago, CTU and DePaul put it on. And so people were really like reading this, like why, people are getting unbaptized. This is so painful for me to hear. And Bishop Lavoie was just saying like how painful it is for him. And he said, my role right now is to listen and absorb the pain. Like, that's all. Like, he's like, that's all I consider my role to be, is to listen and absorb the pain. I'm not trying to convince anyone to not go through these ceremonies. This is a process people need, but we have no, our job is to listen and absorb the pain. So I was really struck by that. Also, I would love to see at least the Catholic Church, of which I'm a member, start acknowledging whose stolen land we're on and how that land came to be in our possession. Like the church owns a lot of land, and to give it. I mean, first I would just say give it back, but like giving it back, it's like a little complicated. Maybe we should just give it back, but like that needs to be done in like consultation and communication with the nations, because you can't like a lot of. Anyway, it's a little trickier because some people maybe want it back, or but maybe they can't like afford the taxes on the land right now. I mean, there's just like you can't just be like, here, giving you the land back, but give it back in some way. Maybe like give them money for what they're working, whatever cause that they're needing support for right now. That's what it was like. Those are two concrete things that I think the church.
I'm not sure.
How to give them back their land.
I'm not sure my comments will really fit directly into this. But I come from an area of southern Brazil where we had a lot of missions, and many of you might have seen the movie Missions, which I recommend highly to see. But those missions were run by the Jesuits exclusively, and there were, I can't place the exact number, but anywhere between 15 and 25 large missions. These were communities that had hundreds, thousands of people. And the Jesuits, and let me paraphrase, I am the first to criticize the Catholic Church. I have missed no chance. But those communities were amazing, so amazing that the mortal enemies, Spain and Portugal, eventually wanted to draw borders, and those communities all were along a river, on both sides of the river. I mean, this was a vast area. And so, these people became very powerful as community, because the Jesuits not only taught him to read and write, they taught him how to make instruments, how to work together, how to organize, how to have sanitation and so on. So a lot of great things. So they became very powerful, and they were also warriors. So they didn't stand for all the Portuguese Empire and the Spanish Empire wanted to do, which was to dominate them. But they became so powerful that eventually the church in Rome said, yes, we got to finish with these people. And they did. They finished with just about all of them. They first removed the Jesuits, and then, the Portuguese came from one side, the Spanish from the other, with their guns and horses, and basically just exterminated all these communities. And these communities still exist. If you ever go to Misiones, Argentina, or the eastern side of the river in Brazil, I very strongly encourage you to. But there's books and so on. I mean, these were really highly educated, organized people, and it's all really due, in part, through the Jesuits. So I don't know how that fits in to counterbalance anything, but it's a beautiful story.
Just to balance that one out, I spent 3 months in college in the Southwest studying Native American, Spanish, and Anglo relationships and how that formed the built environment there, as well as the culture there. And so if you go back in the Rule of the Indies, which was the Spanish colonial law for how they were going to conquer this nation, there are 2 prototype city plans for 2 different kinds of colonialism. And the one is the mission. The mission was a form of colonialism where they took over and transformed the native population into pseudo-Spaniards, and the other is the fort. So these 2 things worked hand in hand. So even though it was and is, like the reason we went there was to study how Native and Spanish and Anglo cultures coexist, which you can't study in every place, it's still really important to note that that mission culture is colonialism. And even if there was a place for Native peoples to, express their culture in some way, it still was a form of oppression. So I bring to this question of church and Native cultures kind of a confusion, knowing very well, fairly well, the mission of San Javier del Bac, which was a Jesuit mission in Tucson area. The Jesuits were withdrawn, and the Franciscans came back years later to find that they were still trying to practice their faith. And I don't really know how to feel about that. I don't know if I should be excited as a Catholic that it took off and that there's another group of Native people called the Nisqually who celebrate with an Easter powwow every year that has a hybridization of Catholic and Native cultures. I don't know if I should celebrate that, or if I should be concerned about that, or if I should mourn that, because they did take that on and own it as their own. But I don't know that it was actually. I don't understand the full context, and so I go back to the concern, or what you had said of the bishop, of just listening to the pain, listening to the joy, listening to where they are now, and how they position that in their own history. Because I don't want to celebrate how much we improved their culture by going in and creating these mission churches, which were literally just created as part of the plan of colonization and domination. And
one of the figures that we looked at a little bit during the week was Black Elk, who became Catholic, and is actually a Dakota community is entering his possible canonization. And so he toured Europe as this crazy Wild West show thing, and he toured all of Europe, and he came back and he said, nothing was appealing to me. It was all awful except for Christianity, and he was drawn to that. And a lot of people doubt whether it was an authentic conversion, but for me as a Catholic, that's hopeful for me to find someone. So I think as a church, we should pay attention to figures like Black Elk, who were amazing. And last weekend we had a chance to be a part of a prayer ceremony in Milwaukee with the Congregation of the Great Spirit, which is the Lakota Ojibwe Catholic Church. And their parish council is all Native. And you can, to be on the parish council, you have to be Native. And, so, we were praying Our Father, but also getting smudged. And so, to me, as a Catholic, I have to be hopeful about those kinds of things. But it can't help the fact that also that Black Elk's first introduction to Christianity was through the Jesuit missions were very questionable in so many ways. So I understand the dilemma. I think the church came in and didn't enculturate for largely. It was always the Indian spirituality that grew wider and embraced the European Christianity. And I think that Christianity, Catholicism in particular, would do well to widen its sensibilities beyond the Euro and really learn from. Tink Tinker is saying basically the key to the future, he believes, is the Native paradigm that holds the liberative key. And I think there's just a lot of powerful stuff in there. How to do that appropriately is the big question.
Yeah, I think, when you expose yourself to reading or discussions or whatever, I think it's important to, what you were saying, as far as balancing things out, to be open You know, we can't say, well, whatever happened, it was all bad, no matter what. Well, let's look at the issue, you know. So I think me as a radical, I tend to do that a lot. You know, it's like, no, you will not convince me no matter what. You know, well, let's listen.
And show up, I think, too. You know, sets like Standing Rock, for example. That was a big invite. You know, there were church people there, but not a lot. The church should have been there, and thousands.
How do people reconcile acquiring new land or like owning land?
Right, and that's what I was trying to kind of get at with that question. Is it like these threads that go back to like, you know, that the oppression with the purpose of acquiring wealth and acquiring power, and how do I fit into that as a person who is benefiting from that acquisition of wealth and power and and I'm a farmer, and how is that what I'm, you know, how am I behaving on this land? How does that tie into all those things?
I don't know how valid this is, but we've also read Wazia Tulin, who's a Dakota woman who wrote a book called What Does Justice Look Like? And she outlines in the state of Minnesota how reparations would look for land. And part of her argument is that the return of land must be in a pristine state. And so, you know, we have a lot of work to do to get the land in a more healthy state if there's actually going to be a genuine movement towards like actual, you know, reparations of land. So, you know, I think about your work of, you know, doing prairie work in central Iowa just being huge. That's what the pristine condition of that land would be.
I know that the Possibility Alliance has done some like more concrete, like reaching out because they wanted to give their land back to, but it was tricky because I think they wrote a couple letters to the different nations who they thought may have originally occupied that land, and like all three said yes. That's ours. So because it probably all was theirs. I don't know the history, but it got a little complicated. So that's why I would say go carefully before just saying I just want to give it all back and like. Because that wasn't like as smart. That ended up creating like some difficulty. So I think what I've heard, I think Regina say maybe what they're looking into now is to think how because they're moving to Maine, and if they sold their property, how to maybe give that money to something that. And also the other thing, none of the nations now are located near that land, and are just saying it wouldn't be practical for us to own that land right now. That wouldn't be that helpful. It's really far away. We couldn't take care of it. We couldn't pay taxes. It would be hard to pay taxes on it. So yeah, they're trying to think of ways of like how to tithe, or maybe just give all the money to like, well, what are they looking for money for? And then like they're going to be moving very close to the Wabanaki reservation in Maine, and the Wabanaki have done, I guess it's the only state in the United States where they've had, in Maine, they had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission initiated by the Wabanaki and their allies. Let's see, they've had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Maine, and also the Wabanaki have started this program called REACH, which is like a training program for settlers, settler descendants, to go through to become better allies to the Wabanaki. And like I guess like 700 settler descendants have gone through this program, and I guess as a result, some of them have said, hey, we want to give you back, we want to like give you our land, we own this land, we want to give it to you. And the Wabanaki said, great, we can't pay taxes on it right now, can you work, clean it up, and like, but basically when we're ready, give it to us. So, and I think there's, so I don't know the answer, but like, and then we also read an article by a friend, a friend gave it to us called Unsettling Settler Desires, which is questioning, well, should we all just, those of us who are white, should we all go back to Europe and not even be here? anyway, that's a whole other discussion. And I'm like, I don't necessarily, I don't think that's.
And then on the taxes, you ask yourself, well, back in 1812, they didn't pay any taxes. Why should they pay taxes now? I mean, it's their land. I mean, it's like.
So yeah, trying to find maybe creative uses of like, okay, if you do own land, better because we own land. So we're like, what do we do with it? Like, do you leave it to your kids or do you leave it back? Do you leave it to a nation that it originally belonged to? Do they even want it? Like how? Yeah, those are all.
In the meantime, supporting organizations that are doing, native-led amazing work with the land, like the White Earth Reservation. I think they have a land recovery project, I believe, that they're trying to reclaim land around them. Another group that we've tied to is Dream of Wild Health in Minnesota. It's an all native-led, native-run farm that they only grow pre-colonial foods. Urban native youth spend their summers out there. If they eat meat, it's only get to eat bison or tilapia. And so they're doing amazing things. So it's like we have access to resources, so let's funnel some to that.
Anyone else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and at Sukasa, like very unexpectedly, I have this very small garden on the fence, but we have a large garden that we lease to 2 white women who are very well-meaning, who come in from the northern suburbs and run a UK berry farm, which is lovely, and they're very sweet. But unexpectedly, these 2 indigenous, Latino, mixed young men showed up to help farm the next-door neighbor's garden space. And I was just like, like they run indigenous-led farming in the city. And it's like interesting to think about when you are in a city context, what that would look like to return the land to the use of, if not to actual ownership of the tribe. And it just led me to think a lot about how we were occupying space at Sukasa and how we can seek out more just relationships with we have a large plot of land that's basically empty, who is using that and not seeking use.
Who cares?
12:18.
Is there anyone that hasn't shared that would like to share?
Can I ask for a little bit about like a history lesson? I'm sorry for my first ignorance here, but the American Indian movement, what were the aims? What were the conclusions? Like, is there any relevance in that history to us today? Anything we can learn from it for those who know more about it? Because I'm struggling to participate. Like, the examples of like where there's organizing by Native people like gives me an anchor to be like, okay, there's something real to relate to.
Right.
Because I think anything that happens outside of relationship is bound for disaster. So